is Mary Lyle. I am the Director of Education for the Western Heritage Museum. And today I'm going to have a wonderful conversation with shark expert Tyler Bowling from the Florida Museum of Natural History.
So I'm the manager of the Florida Program for Shark Research, which includes the International Shark Attack File. I've always been interested in sharks since I was a small boy, and I decided at a very young age to go to school and study them, and I'm living my dream now. I'm very lucky. And so what I do basically on a day-to-day is I look into any shark attacks that happen anywhere in the world, and we see what circumstances were involved. We work with local authorities, witnesses, healthcare professionals, and try to figure out, who was at fault, who initiated this. Was it the human or the shark? What circumstances led up to this? And normally we see that, that there were explanations to explain this. These are not, predators out hunting people or anything. These happen normally as kind of an investigatory bite or in murky water where the animal couldn't see and made a mistake and makes a quick bite and goes away. And even, these incidents are all extremely, extremely rare. So it's not something you need to be really worried about. And then on my personal research that I focus on is the actual movement of sharks in relation to people. So seeing where sharks are coming inshore and overlapping with beachgoers.
So where do these human-shark interactions occur?
So we actually see that the most shark bites occur in Florida, right here in the United States. And that's partly due to the number of people in the water, as well as the species we have here, as well as the ability of reporting. We have a lot of areas around the globe that are kind of dark, where we don't get information. And so what we have on the East Coast is a very large population of black-tip sharks, Carcharodontis limbatus. And they move up and down the coast annually, and they are very, very close to shore. So they hunt actually in the surf, which can be very murky, and they avoid predators by moving into shore because they're a relatively small shark, 6 feet or less. And so they're in those waves right where the people are recreating. They react to some movement, and they're usually smaller than the actual person they bit. So these are very minor incidents, but they add up. So we see the vast majority right here in Florida.
And usually that's because the shark is mistaking it for food. Yeah. Human beings aren't very good to eat, are we?
We're very bony compared to what they're used to across species, and we don't like to generalize because sharks as a whole are very diverse. I mean, a bull shark and a great white are about as genetically related as a dog and a kangaroo. And so the one thing that we can kind of see across bites among species is that they tend to be from juvenile animals. And so we're guessing that this is because they're still learning hunting techniques. And these animals are close to shore, they're in those waves, and they're likely reacting to movement. And they might latch onto a person's foot, and that person might be bigger than they are. So the shark's freaked out, the human's freaked out, they both go their separate ways, and it's really not all that bad. The natural inclination is to splash around and get away, but it's actually really important that you don't splash too much. Even prolonged splashing, even if you hadn't been bit, splashing is a low frequency sound underwater. And so if you splash for a long time, it might cause a shark to come and investigate, because low frequency sounds would be something of a struggling animal. But let's say that you are in the water, you've been bitten. The first thing is making sure that the shark is leaving you alone. They have very sensitive snouts. They have electroreception in their snouts, so they can actually sense the electric fields that your muscles give off. So punching them in the snout can disrupt their senses. Probing the eyes or the gills, those are very sensitive areas. And then backing away, making eye contact with the animal. Generally at this point, the shark will have taken off, but if it continues to follow, face the animal. They're predators. Many, many predators across the animal kingdom are more hesitant when they can see the prey's eyes, because the prey is therefore aware of them. And so they're more likely to fight back. And so an animal is less likely to approach when they know that you're looking at them. So you can actually stare a shark down.
See, I really didn't know that. There is no shark repellent spray, right? Like, and bear spray, or is there?
There are several products out on the market, chemical based, and those are usually formed around the smell of basically dead shark. And so the idea is the smell of death would repel them. There are also some devices that send out certain electric fields that would feel uncomfortable to the shark. However, the problem with these is they're tested and designed with only a small group of species involved. If this product is made for, say, tiger sharks, it may not do anything for white sharks. So these aren't guarantees, but they do grant people peace of mind at some point.
So you said off the coast of Florida are the majority, but let's look at our other coasts.
So we don't actually see a ton of bites within the Gulf in any of the states, whether it be Texas or even Florida's Gulf side. And that's just due to the kind of the species and where they're found. We do occasionally see bites, but not nearly as often. We do see a fair number of incidents over on the West Coast, so California, for example. And those are usually juvenile white sharks, so great whites. They're going after surfers because there's seals in the water, they're hunting seals. And the way a white shark hunts is it dives down very, very deep and it shoots straight up by targeting silhouettes. And if you've ever looked at the silhouette of a surfer and a seal, they're quite similar, unfortunately. So these are usually mistakes, younger animals, and it's usually a single bite. Unfortunately, an animal that size, even a single bite or a test bite can leave massive damage. And that's where we see the fatalities. And people, just to quick note, people like to say that there's no great whites in Florida, and that's actually not true. We have great whites in Florida. However, we don't have seals, and these aren't air-breathing animals. So if they're not coming to the surface to eat mammals, there's no reason for them to come up.
You know, humans, once again, we're predators as well. I'd like you to talk a little bit about how human beings can be a little bit more responsible.
So the main thing that facing sharks, as from a conservation standpoint, is finning. And a bit of background about finning is usually the pectoral fins and the fins right here, and as well as the tail, the caudal fins. Those are generally cut off. Unfortunately, sometimes when the animal's still alive and it's thrown back to drown, very sad. And then they dry the fins and it's used in a ceremonial soup in some Asian cultures. Now, this is not something that the general public is consuming. These are very, very expensive commodities. And so this is something that the wealthiest are using only. There have been very, very high estimates. It's hard to get numbers on this because much of this is black market trade. This is not something that the U.S. is involved in, but there have been upward estimates of 100 million sharks a year. We really don't know, but it is one of the main threats of sharks across the world, especially for open water pelagic species like a mako shark or a blue shark. As far as right here at home in the United States, the North American model for conservation is one of the best in the world. And our shark populations are actually doing quite well. And shark fisheries, we have several that are very sustainable and quite healthy. And we actually encourage people of species that are healthy. For example, the black tips, like I discussed earlier, their population is booming. And so we actually encourage people to take part in that fishery. It helps foster an understanding of these animals, of value, and appreciation. So they want sharks in their ecosystems. They're going to protect them. They're going to be more involved. Saying to fish no sharks is actually not always the right answer. There's a lot that we don't know about white sharks. And I'm sure that there's someone who can speak to this better than I. We don't even know where their pupping grounds are, where their mating grounds are. One of the meccas for white sharks was South Africa, and they disappeared. They're gone from South Africa. And we believe that was due to a pod of orcas moving into the area. But the entire white shark population just vanished. And so they're very mysterious. And so there's still a lot we really don't know. So their numbers could be higher or lower than we estimate. Sharks are generally, but not always, because remember, there's very different sharks, are generally at the top of the food chain. I mean, these are apex predators. And so the role of apex predators in these ecosystems is to remove, the weaker, if you will. So whether it be older or sick or different prey species. So they keep those prey populations, both their numbers in check and the overall health of the genetics, if you will. So prey species aren't breeding out of control. Their numbers are well because the sharks are eating them. The sharks are also selecting the easier prey for them, so the ones that are less likely to get away, which increases the health of the overall population. Honestly, this is something that a lot of research is still being done. We don't know the extent. One of the biggest things are something we call ghost catch. So abandoned fishing gear, sharks can become entangled and they can't pump water over their gills, they'll drown. And the big thing that a lot of people are looking into right now is microplastics. And we really don't know the extent of how microplastics are affecting sharks. But as with many, many other animals in the oceans, it seems like they are affected. One study that was recent talking about whale sharks ingesting a lot of microplastics because they're filter feeders. So they move through the ocean with their mouths open and they were ingesting large quantities of microplastics.
I was reading a story just the other day about how the sharks navigate with the electrical impulses, and now we're putting out all this electricity. Got wind farms in the ocean. We have other things that we're doing. How is that affecting the sharks?
That was a great paper. I know many of the authors, and they did a wonderful job of kind of showing what we've suspected for a very long time. So it's wonderful to see this work being done. And this is kind of the next step, is what you're hinting at. We're not sure how much they will be affected by our man-made influences. Likely, there will be things that we are unaware of. For example, wind turbines out at sea that may affect them. We'll just have to see how this happens and what precautions we can then take and learn from that. But we don't know yet. A myth that I hear all the time is that a shark can smell blood from a mile away. And what people really kind of picture when they hear that is, I scraped my knee and every shark within a mile radius has just become alert. It doesn't quite work like that. And it also depends on the species. Once the blood has diffused in the water for a length, about a mile, and usually much shorter for many species, that's when the sharks can detect it in the water. So they can detect it once it's dissolved into all the other water particles. There's been many, many experiments done showing that sharks really don't react to human blood. However, you pour a bunch of fish blood in there and they frenzy instantly. There's an obvious difference. My guess, and I'm not a Megalodon guy, I will preface that, is that it was outcompeted in a changing climate. And so around the same time that Megalodon was dying out, at least to the best of our knowledge, there's some debate about the timeline. Megalodon was actually on its way out when a smaller predator that we still have, the great white, was coming onto the scene. As prey was moving to cooler areas, Megalodon was a kind of a shallow, warm sea predator. They were just outcompeted.
Do you go crazy with all the Shark Week stuff and some of the crazy theories that come out?
Shark Week is very controversial because they do a lot of pseudoscience, and they have a lot of people who are not scientists pretend to be scientists. One viewpoint about Shark Week that I can appreciate, the public is engaging, and that's something that's positive. It has a wider reach than many of us would normally have, and it's getting people aware of sharks and thinking about sharks in daily conversation. Now, it's not necessarily in the form that we would have preferred, and we've got to do a lot of damage control usually after they make up some crazy made-up documentary about how they were going to go catch Megalodon, which is most assuredly extinct, but there is a ray of sunshine and positivity coming from Shark Week. So the largest shark living is the whale shark, and they get over 40 feet long. The whale shark is a filter feeder, so it's actually eating microscopic plankton as well as some small fishes, and so it's perfectly harmless. And the smallest shark that we know of, because we're constantly discovering new deep water species, is the dwarf lantern shark, which is smaller than my hand. Sharks are not worth worrying about or staying out of the water. They're very important. They're very fascinating. They're very cool. And if you are afraid of sharks, the best way I can explain it is if you're out in the woods at night and you hear a noise, it's a little spooky because you can't see and you're not sure what made that noise. Well, out in the ocean, we're not really made to be there. And so it's your mind kind of creates monsters where there are none because you can't really see what's out there. And so don't, let the sharks become monsters. Go to aquariums, go to museums, look up online, check it out, the Florida Program for Shark Research's website. We've got lots of information and just learn about sharks. They're really not that scary.
Well, I thank you so much for taking this time to chat with us and give us more information about current sharks and what we need to do to keep them safe and to keep ourselves safe. So thank you, Tyler.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.